Good afternoon to all of you. Just a few words to present myself. I'm António Alexandre, captain in Portuguese Navy in reserve, and I'm also a PhD in International Relations from Nova University of Lisbon. The paper I will present has this title, Human Security, Maritime Security, Causal Link, the case of Gulf of Guinea. And of course, we are now moved on the maritime domain. To deal with this vast and complex subject, I have defined some issues to address. The first one is related to the key concepts of this research, maritime security, human security, and how they relate to each other. The second is about analyzing the phenomenon of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing in the Gulf of Guinea, and now it poses a significant threat to the human security of the coastal populations, and consequently to the maritime security of the entire region. And last one intends to highlight the need to build a good order in surrounding maritime spaces as a means of mitigating the existing challenges. Well, moving in following slides, I will focus on the key concepts defined. The first one will be the maritime security, which is a term which draws attention to the new challenges in the maritime domain and to the way in which the associated issues should be addressed. Due to its importance, some of the most relevant international organizations have their own definition of maritime security. For the United Nations, for instance, there are two different views of maritime security. A narrow view involves protection against crimes, direct threats to the territorial integrity of states, and includes security against crimes committed at sea, like piracy, armed robbery, and maritime terrorism. But there is another view, a broader one, which includes intentional and unlawful damage to the marine environment, like illegal dumping of waste and depredation of natural resources, in particular the mentioned before. I've mentioned before the illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. For NATO, for instance, maritime security includes maintaining freedom of navigation, securing trade lanes and critical maritime infrastructures, protecting marine resources, and ensuring environmental safety. And for the African Union, it draws attention to a broad array of real and potential threats that could result in mass casualties and inflict catastrophic economic harm to African states. And finally, for the European Union, it is understood as a set of circumstances of the global maritime domain in which national and international law are applied, freedom of navigation is granted, and citizens, transport, the environment, and marine resources are protected. Well, according to the United Nations, these are the most relevant threats to maritime security, ranging from piracy to international and unlawful damage to the marine environment. As I mentioned before, our focus will be the illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing and its possible future connection to piracy and armed robbery at sea in Gulf of Guinea. Move on, the human security concept. It seems to me relevant to mention that for years, the general concept of security had been interpreted in a very narrow way as the security of the territory from external aggression or the protection of national interests abroad. In this sense, security had always been much more related to states than to people. And it was the publication of the Human Development Report, 1994, by the United Nations Development Programme, the origin of the creation of the term human security. Well, several scholars have been since dedicated to analyzing the human security concept. Calder, Martin, and Selchow are among them. They consider that the concept is referred to the security of individuals and communities, and that threats to human security occur across a broad spectrum, from genocide and slavery to natural disasters and mass violations of the rights to food, health, and housing. Other scholars like Fukuda, Per, and Messinio consider that the central idea is the primacy of human life as the object of reference. By focusing on the individual, it is to contain all aspects of human rights, including the obligation to meet basic needs of populations and requirements of political and social freedom. Well, let's see now what the illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing stands for. Illegal fishing refers to activities conducted by national or foreign vessels in waters under the jurisdiction of a state without the permission of that state or in contravention of its laws and regulations. Unreported fishing relates to activities that are not disclosed or are deliberately misreported to the relevant authorities. And unregulated fishing refers to activities conducted in areas where there are no applicable conservation or management measures, such as outside the boundaries of the exclusive economic zone of any coastal state. In these circumstances, our argument is that IUU fishing is currently the greatest threat to the human security of the coastal populations of the Gulf of Guinea and potentially to maritime security of the entire region, which recommends the implementation of a good order at sea that allows the adoption of concrete measures to address it. Well, regarding the link between maritime security and human security, I would like to emphasize that both terms are relatively recent, having emerged in the conceptual edifice of the discipline of international relations with the opening of security agenda in the post-Cold War period. In line with the different visions of these two concepts, conviction emerges that some of the threats to human security conveyed in maritime domain are likewise threats to maritime security. In these circumstances, IUU fishing is a very relevant issue that affects human security in its multiple components, ranging from the safety of all those who carry out legal activities at sea to the vulnerability of coastal populations to threats that develop in maritime domain more broadly. And what is the impact of IUU fishing in the GOG region? Well, here you can see some of the most important results related to this phenomenon. It jeopardizes the management of living resources. It undermines emerging blue economy initiatives across the African continent, costing coastal states billions in lost revenue. It causes damage to food security of coastal communities, which are very dependent on the rich protein, and it erodes confidence in law enforcement, creates a sense of disrespect and neglect. Let's focus now on IUU fishing as a threat to human security and to maritime security in GOG region. Well, in line with what we have said, fish plays a vital role in human security in GOG coastal communities, as stated by several scholars, among them Ifsinaki Okafor-Yarwood and Iya Belabib. The fisheries sector is also the source of direct and indirect employment for about 9 million people across West Africa. Well, according to the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, a global network of investigative journalists, almost half of the vessels reported to have been involved in IUU fishing between 2010 and 2022 were detected in Africa's maritime spaces, being the West Coast the most affected region, where almost 40% of global IUU fishing occurred. And why is so easy to practice IUU fishing activities in GOG region? Well, there are some factors that facilitate the occurrence of this phenomenon in that huge maritime region. The country's lack of capacity to exercise control over their waters, the frequent changes of flag and or fishing vessels' names, the evasion to sanctions due to corruption and or ineffective authorities monitoring, the use of ethically questionable practices by fishing operators, and many of the ocean's living resources are being severely depleted by fishing vessels from some of the richest nations in Europe and Asia. Well, all this said, it is possible to anticipate some mitigation measures to prevent IUU fishing in the GOG region. The first thing we have to look at is the absence of a sustainable fisheries management strategy in the region. Even thinking on the agreements signed by coastal states of GOG and states from other continents, mainly in Asia and Europe, data available shows that GOG states are facing a overfishing by several foreign vessels from those foreign countries. And related to the previous point, the lack of adequate capacity for surveillance of maritime spaces by most of the states in the GOG region is of great importance and recommends the creation of concrete measures to address this issue. This means that more states and international organizations ought to be involved in supporting the coastal states of GOG to deal with this phenomenon. Well, in these circumstances, and in order to meet Geoffrey Till's mindset, Geoffrey Till was probably the first strategist to mention the need for a good order at sea. Concrete steps should be taken to implement a good order at sea in maritime spaces of GOG. Apart the ongoing surveillance initiatives, like the Regional Monitoring, Control and Surveillance Center, financed by the European Union program named Improves Regional Fisheries Governance in Western Africa, it is important that more initiatives could be implemented and more naval assets could be deployed to a GOG region to be involved in maritime security operations. As we are about to conclude, I would like to highlight some points. Well, this paper has examined the impact of IUU fishing on the human security of GOG populations and how this may influence the maritime security of that vast region. IUU fishing in the GOG undermines the sustainable management of the living resources and contributes to the sharp loss of revenues for coastal states. And in the absence of adequate means of subsistence, some populations may have an increased predisposition to engage in alternative activities related to transnational organized crime, such as piracy and armed robbery at sea against ships. And what could be the way ahead in terms of combating IUU fishing in the GOG? Well, the creation, as I mentioned before, of a good order at sea throughout the GOG is essential to bring together African states and states from other continents, particularly Europe and also South America, even if they have signed fishing agreements with each other for that purpose. All states and the regional organizations to which some of them belong should have the will to create, and this is very important, should have the will to create a code of conduct to guide their actions in order to mitigate the effects of overfishing and IUU fishing. And I conclude proving, in my opinion, my argument. The GOG, which already has some fish stocks depleted, may be confronted with the risk of many others collapsing in a relatively short period of time, which, if it happens, will have unforeseeable consequences for the human security of populations that are in dire need of them, and for fishermen who will be left without any source of income, which will greatly contribute to the maritime insecurity of the region. Thank you for your attention.